What's up? This is Doggy Diamonds, and right now you on Maccabees TV. You see that red button over there? You might be looking at this video, but I don't know if you subscribe yet. Subscribe. What's the point of coming here if you're not going to subscribe? Hit that button. Peace.
Shalom, family. Welcome to another edition of Maccabees TV, aka welcome to my new channel, Priest Danyaahla Uncut. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to present my slides from the White Lies Matter presentation that took place at Nicholas Bookstore on March the 4th. The reason why I'm presenting these slides now, or I should say representing them, is because I got a lot of comments from the 20-minute snippet of video that I put up on Maccabees TV that the slides were kind of blurry and people couldn't see them. So I didn't really want that to be the case. So what I decided to do, rather than just upload that whole video and then have to answer comments about what I was showing or what I wasn't showing, that I would just represent the slides from home to the people that were not able to attend or come online. All right, as well as for the people that were online but probably couldn't see some of the slides. All right, so let's get right down into that. Before we do, though, I wanted to say, first of all, that Passover is coming up. April the 10th, 2017, we'll be observing the Passover. Lions of Israel, AOC Ambassadors of Christ, as well as Apostles of New Jerusalem. We'll be doing this in the Bronx. We have a place. I've been getting a lot of calls from different people, as well as inboxes online of people that actually want to come and they want to attend. So what we're doing is we're asking Israel that if you plan on attending, whether you are one person or a family of 4 or 5, we're asking for a $50 donation. We know that Passovers can be expensive to put on, to observe. You know, the lamb is extremely expensive, as we know. If you eat lamb any time other than the Passover, you buy it to cook, you know how much it costs. The unleavened bread will be cooked from scratch. The wine, the bitter herbs, as well as the place where we're having the Passover and other expenses. You know, so we're just asking Israel if you plan on coming through to help us to make sure that we have provisions for everybody that plans on attending and that we all could have a good time. You know, a lot of people have been hitting me up. So besides the 3 or 4 mentioned camps that I mentioned, there'll probably be other people that's going to come through as well. So, you know, we're going to have a great turnout and we're going to have a great time observing the fall of our enemies, as well as looking forward to the fall of our enemies, which is modern day Egypt, Esau, the so-called white man, because his time is running out as well. All right, so let's move on. Support the Maccabees Alliance Council, which is AOC, Ambassadors of Christ, ANJ, Apostles of New Jerusalem, IAI, I Am Israel, LOI, Lions of Israel, FOPE, For Our People's Edification, UKOI, United Kingdom of Israel, and ISOC, that's a typo, ISOC, Israelite Saints of Christ, Israelite camps that have come together in the spirit of brotherhood, the spirit of Psalms 133, the spirit of Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 1, to discuss things that we have in common, as well as differences we may have, to present a more unified front to the world as far as Israelites are concerned, and to show the world that we as Israelites, we can work together. We can be brothers and sisters. All right, so there's many other camps that's reaching out to us that want to be a part of this. If you want to be a part of this, just reach out to me on my Facebook page, Daniel Benjamin, or you can come to my YouTube page, Priest Danyaahla Uncut, and reach out to me, man. You know, we're trying to do something different in Israel this year. We have a maniac in office called Trump, so we have to put our best foot forward and try to come together as brothers and sisters, man, in this critical day and time that we're living in. All right, let's move on. All right, this guy right here on my screen, this guy's the devil. We're gonna get right down into it. This guy is nothing but the damn devil. All right, I call him the Crypt Keeper. Y'all know him as James White, one and the same, pretty similar. They could pass for brothers. The face only his mother could love, maybe. Now this devil, you have to know the truth in order to tell lies, right? So the way he presents himself to the world, specifically when he's been dealing with the Israelite movement, him and his lover, his butt buddy, his bosom buddy, probably his butt buddy, vocab alone, the way they've presented themselves to the world is though we Israelites are delusional. We just are a bunch of black people that have no identity, that really have no information, and we just woke up one morning and decided that we wanted to be the Jews. It's just that simple. We just made it up out of thin air. So they say. All right. But this guy's nothing but the devil. The word devil means deceiver, and he is a deceiver. He is a liar, just like his forefather Satan was a liar. He is a liar. I shouldn't say his forefather, but just like his forefather Esau was a liar. That's what I should say. Just like Esau was a liar, this guy is a liar. Okay? And we're going to see that as we proceed further through the PowerPoint lesson. Now, I want to talk about this devil right here, J. Edgar Hoover, because he'll be very important as I go through the next few slides. See, J. Edgar Hoover set up some programs through the FBI that were pretty much centered on disrupting and interrupting our people from coming back to their true nationality. Now, we know that some of us that came to the knowledge of us being Israelites, we went through different stages. We might have went through Islam. Some of us were 5 percenters, Nation of Islam. Some of us were Moors. Some of us were into the Black Panther Party and different things. And so, you know, all these movements that of black people waking up, you know what I'm saying, to some sense of pride, some sense of self-love, you know, some sense of unity, for lack of a better word, you know, trying to find ourselves. This guy set programs in place to destroy that, from the time of Marcus Garvey all the way up to the time of the Black Panthers and everything in between. Well, we know that J. Edgar Hoover was a flaming homosexual, all right? He used to dress in drag, and this is coming from the FBI files, not from Priest Danyaahla. You can actually look this thing up. He was a cross-dresser. And his lover, Clyde Tolson, this dude was never seen in public with any women. So this dude was his lover. Clyde Tolson was his lover, and they're actually buried side by side that at the request of J. Edgar Hoover when he died. They're buried side by side. So this guy was a flaming homosexual, okay? Now, this is from the Freedom of Information Act. Let's read it. Fear of an Israelite planet. FBI files made public due to the Freedom of Information Act. One of the programs that J. Edgar Hoover set in place to disrupt our people waking up and eventually come back to the nationality was a program called COINTELPRO. Most of you have heard of it before. It's short for the Counterintelligence Program. And these files have been made public through what is known as the Freedom of Information Act. And via the Freedom of Information Act, we can go back now and we can read about this particular program, which I want to focus on, that Hoover set up. And let's read about some of the things that were in this program. Now, J. Edgar Hoover, as I said, made it a priority to destroy any and all black movements. When I say black, I'm talking about blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. By discrediting them, the movements, by defaming and destroying, the 3 Ds as I call them, discrediting, defaming, and ultimately destroying these movements. He wanted leadership in the eyes of so-called responsible black people, talking about the middle-class black people that have faith in America. He wanted to destroy, discredit, and defame them in the eyes of responsible black people, so-called responsible, by the white community in general and by the general black community in general as well. All right. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but if you look to the right, we want to look at point number 4. Okay. Point number 4 says part of the initiative of the counterintelligence program, okay, was to prevent militant black nationalist groups and leaders from gaining respectability. Now, what they consider to be militant blacks were organizations that were not militant at all. You see, they were monitoring Martin Luther King. They were monitoring Marcus Garvey. They were monitoring all these different groups that never took up arms. The only group that took up arms to a certain degree was the Black Panthers, and that was for self-defense. But they put and lumped all the groups under one umbrella. Okay? So prevent militant blacks, nationalist groups, and leaders from gaining respectability by discrediting them to 3 separate segments of the community. The goal of discrediting black nationalists be handled tactically in 3 ways. You must discredit these groups and individuals to first the responsible Negro community, like I said, those that love America and want to uphold America, right? Second, they must be discredited to the white community, okay? And it goes on and on and on, as I said. So this thing was about discrediting us. Discrediting us is a very, very important tactic that is a part of the COINTEL program, which many people say was disbanded, but I'm here to tell you it exists under other names. And it is in practice today, and is being practiced against the Israelite community today. And a lot of us aren't even aware of the tactics. Let's move on to the next slide. Here's an example of defaming us, right? You had two movies that came out recently. One was called 999, as you can see. And in the movie 999, you have Woody Harrelson as one of the major characters in the movie. And you see that there's an Israelite dressed in the movie, right? And if you watch the movie, you can clearly see that we were put in there for no other reason than just to discredit us and make us look silly and stupid. Like we're just standing, yelling at a corner. We're just angry black men for no reason. To display us as just being angry black men, which is not the purpose of being an Israelite. The purpose of being an Israelite is to repent, come back, keep the laws, statutes, and commandments, and we go out in the street not to be angry black men, not to yell at white people, but to wake our people up. There's a certain remnant or elect that the Most High is looking for, and we go out in the highways and the byways, and we're appealing to them, the same way the prophets of old did. Are we loud sometimes? Yes. Why? Because the Bible tells us in the book of Isaiah, chapter 58, verse 1, that we should cry aloud and spare not. Cry aloud to who? To our people. Peradventure, some of the elect might wake up. But anyway, this movie, they put the Israelites in there, and it's one tactic, one way of defaming us by putting us in this movie and making us seem like we're just crazy. And then you have the other movie, which was the movie about Obama, Barack Obama, right? To the right. And you also see you have Israelites in that movie as well. Now, this never happened. Barack Obama never stood in front of no daggone Israelite camp. This is fiction, right? But they have Obama standing in front of the Israelite camp, and in front of the Israelite camp, what is it of all the things that we're talking about? We're not talking to our people about repentance in this movie, in this clip. We're not talking to our people about waking up in their nationality and to keep the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High, and to stop killing one another and learn to love one another, so forth and so on, which is the majority of what we teach when in the streets. They're not showing that. In this movie, the Israelite brothers are calling a black woman a bitch, and that's strategic. That's strategic. That of all the things that they could say that we're saying, they saying in this movie that we're calling a black woman a bitch, which the majority of camps don't go out in the street and stand on the streets and call the black woman a bitch randomly. That's crazy. But that's the tactic that they want to use to try to defame us. All right. Moving on to the next slide. The next phase of trying to defame us is to sick these so-called Christian groups on us. Now, Reformed Apologetics put together a documentary which I call a joke. It's an absolute joke. It's a travesty as to how bad this documentary was, and it's called The Black Hebrew Israelites Debunked. All right? They tried to discredit us through their media platforms, their social media platforms. They make all these movies and these videos trying to prove that we're not the Israelites. See, the so-called white man has gone around for centuries calling himself a Jew, and nobody tried to disprove nothing. He has brought absolutely no evidence whatsoever to prove that he's a Jew, but you don't have Reformed Apologetics trying to disprove that the white man is a Jew. But the minute a so-called black man comes forward and says, no, I'm the real Jew, now we have to do a documentary to debunk that. You see, when we go out in the streets and we say that Christ is black, now everybody has a problem. For the last 500 years, when Christ was depicted as a so-called white man from the time of Caesar Borgias all the way up until today, that false white image of Caesar Borgias, when that was put up, nobody questioned who is that guy. As far as everybody's concerned, they saw that image, they were told that was Jesus, and they accepted it. No problems. I'm talking about white people, Chinese people, East Indian people, Arab people, and black people. We all accepted that image as being Jesus Christ. But the minute a black man stands up and says, no, the Bible says Christ was so dark, he looked like he burned in a furnace, now we have to have a documentary. Now we have to be debunked. Now color doesn't matter. Now we don't know what he looked like. Now the Bible doesn't mean what it's really saying. When it says he had feet like unto fine brass, that's a metaphor. And all this other garbage that you hear, that's what's going on. That's another way of trying to discredit us by trying to discredit what it is that we teach and to make it seem like we have no facts. But we do have facts, and I'm going to show that in this documentary, in this PowerPoint lesson. All right? Now, let's prove that we have facts. Here you have the good doctor. I put the word good in parentheses because this man's nothing but the damn devil. But here you have the good doctor, James White, a.k.a. the Crypt Keeper. He gets on the show and he talks all this stuff about history and early church fathers and this, that, and the third, right? Now, my question is this. Has the good doctor ever heard of this book called Early Spanish Manuscript Illuminations? When you were doing all your shows about the Israelites, right, were you familiar with this book? Because apparently we just black Israelites that just decided that we were going to teach that these people of the Bible were black, right? So I wonder if you've ever heard of this book. The name of the book is called Early Spanish Manuscript Illuminations. Right? Let's move on. Let's see what's in this book. Here we go. Right? This is on page 50, I believe it's 55, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to grab the book while I'm talking to y'all. I'm going to make sure, because it's a little blurry. You can still see it. It's a little blurry, so let me give you the exact page in case anybody decides. It's page 55, yes. So page 55 of this book, Early Spanish Manuscript Illuminations. Let me show you how I know the white man is the devil. Let's prove it, right? It says, this is talking about plate A and plate B. We're going to focus on plate A, okay? To your right, what you're looking at is plate A, okay? I have two side-by-side pictures here, okay? So the plate A is actually on page 54. If you get the book, the picture is actually on page 54, and the writing is on page 55. So you're looking at plate 8A. Let's see what it says. It says, Christ. So the subject of the picture to your right is Christ, whose darkened flesh tone now gives him an almost negroid cast. Is shown enthroned between two cherubims with a great circular firmament suspended from the hands of two seraphs. Let's examine that statement. It says Christ has darkened flesh tone that makes him look almost Negro. Now I want you to look at this picture, and I want you to tell me, does that picture look almost Negro to you, or is that picture Negro? The answer is, clearly, if you have two eyes, that picture is of a Negro. And it says Christ is in the center of two cherubs. So that's Christ right there in the middle in the green garment. And he's as dark as he wants to be. Look at his face. Look at his hands. That's Christ depicted as a black man almost 1,000 years before we got to America. Before there was ever a thing, as the good doctor likes to call, a black Israelite. This picture is from 945 AD. So in 945 AD, in Spain, Christ was being depicted as being black. I thought we just made this stuff up. Where is this coming from? And the angels on either side of him, the cherubs, they're also black with afros. Look at the face. Look at the hands. And look at the seraphs above them. Brown, black, with afros. But the writing on the left-hand side says, almost Negro. You see how the white man is the devil? They tell you that we just make this stuff up, but we can go all throughout history and we can find it if you know where to look. I thought black Israelites just made this stuff up. What does the good doctor have to say about this? Is this fake? What does he have to say about this? That's what I want to know. Okay? Now I'm taking it one thing back because that image is on the front of the book. Now, if you see the front of the book, you wouldn't know what it's talking about. The author doesn't tell you what it's about. It just tells you it's about manuscripts and illuminations. So you have no idea what that is. You'll walk right past that. But when you open it up, it tells you it's in a manuscript, an illumination of biblical text. So it's depicting what the Bible is talking about, and it's depicting them as being black. So much for us making up information. Okay? We already saw this. Let's move on. Remember the Philistines? The Philistines, right? This is plate 9A and 9B. This is one page over. This is page 56 and 57. And what do we see here? We see the Philistines versus Israel. And I'm asking, where's the white people? Let's read what it says. This is from the Leon Bible of 960 AD. 960 AD. almost 1,000 years before there was anything that you would call or want to coin a black Hebrew Israelite. There was a Bible called the Leon Bible, and these images were inside of it. Let's read what it says. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side. And there was a valley between them. So I'm just going to leave it right there. That's all I need. So now let's look at the picture. Let's examine it. Where are the Philistines? The Philistines obviously would be the guys on the right, because you got a giant right there. That's supposed to be Goliath. And all the people that's over on that side with Goliath, they're all black. Different shades, but they're all black, and so is Goliath. Look at his hands, look at his face, and they all have afros. And this is 1,000 years almost before we got to America, where in the 1800s you have black people calling themselves Israelites at Israel Hill. Almost 1,000 years. So much for us just making stuff up. And on the left-hand side you have the Israelites, and they're all black with afros. You see how the white man is the devil and a liar? And then they get on these stupid platforms like Apologetics Ministries or whatever the hell it's called, Alpha and Mega Ministries, and lie and mock us as though we don't know what we're talking about. No, we don't. We're talking about, you don't know what you're talking about, devil. Now, what you're looking at is Google Images. I went there. You can see the search. I took a screenshot of my TV. You can see of my computer. You can see the search that I did, right? I wanted to see what Google has about the Leon Bible, because we know Google Images is very sanitized. That's why people are under the impression about a lot of the icons that they see today. Even in middle-aged Europe and all that stuff is trash on Google Images. It's very sanitized. That's why you got to go and you still got to read books. You still have to read books. This is the early stages of what's known as iconoclasm, or I should say the late stages, because that's a typo. I should have put late stages. Why? Because iconoclasm really began during the time of the Greeks. We read about that in the book of Maccabees. That's when we start reading about that. Iconoclasm started with the Greeks. What is iconoclasm? You can look it up for yourself. It's the destruction of images, particularly holy images. Okay? This is Job 9:24 that we're seeing right here. Okay? Because all the way to the right, you can see that there's a dark image of the Philistines, which I already showed you the slide before. That image to the right is the Philistines on the left, and the Israelites on the right, they're all black. But you could clearly see that in the Leon Bible, as we go on, some of the images were whitewashed. They were whitewashed. Okay? Because either the Israelites are black or white, but they're not both. They're not both. So the white man's the damn devil. And when he got his hands on our records during the time of the Renaissance, they added the rest of this crap that you're seeing to the left in there. But some of the images remained. And I just showed you a scholastic book where the author is using the authentic images. So even if you don't agree, don't argue with me. I didn't write that book. I didn't put those images in that book. That white man did. He knows the truth. See, what you white people do, you write these scholarly books and you trade these books amongst yourselves. You didn't expect Negroes to get a hold. These books are not for Negroes. Black people go into the African-American section when they go into the bookstores like Barnes and Nobles and other books. They go into the African-American section or the Africa section. Now, some of our history is in those areas too. But black people don't go into the Middle Ages and middle European sections where a lot of our history is too. We don't go there. But I go there. But Israelites, we go there. And we bringing this information out, and ain't nothing you can do about it. Devil, your time is up, man. Your time for lying is over. We got the facts. So keep lying to your followers about the Israelites. We got the facts, okay? Let's move on. So that last stage was discrediting us through those documentaries, those fake documentaries that they put out where they tell people that we don't know what we're talking about. And if we wanted to, which there's some camps that already have, if we wanted to, okay, we could pick that whole documentary apart easily. But some of us have better things to do than that. Phase number 3, okay? Phase number 3 is to try to turn us into a terrorist organization so that they can move against us, okay? The so-called white man has something called Project Megiddo. Project Megiddo is an FBI strategic assessment of the potential for domestic terrorism in the United States. This is very, very important, family. It is an FBI assessment of the potential for domestic terrorism in the United States. The Israelites, we teach that the Most High is going to deliver us from America. The same way the Most High delivered us out of Egypt. We don't believe in taking up arms to try to overthrow the government, nothing like that. The so-called white man created the goddamn gun. How the hell we gonna get a gun? He got guns that we never even heard of, that do things we couldn't even possibly imagine. That he don't even show us. So we know better than to try to pick up arms to overthrow the white man. But the so-called white man, what he's doing is he's creating the climate in order to say that we're committing terrorist attacks so he can move against us. Like I said, first it was defame, then it's discredit, and now they want to destroy. But if they wait for us to pick up arms to overthrow them, it's never going to happen. So they put the perception out there. They have something called Project Megiddo. And in Project Megiddo, as you can see, number 4, which is on your right-hand side, is a whole so-called assessment of the Israelite movement and our potential for violence against America, which we don't promote. Let me say it again. We don't promote. But they're putting the documentation out there anyway, right? Let's move on. Watch this. Now, in order for that to take place, they also have to ingratiate that into the minds of the people. Now, how do they do that? They do that through Hollywood. Thus, it brings us to the movie Asher that they've been talking about over the last couple of years. Asher is a strategic move. Remember, we was in those other 2 movies, 999, right? And we were also in that movie about Obama. So here go the Israelites in another movie. All of a sudden, the world has a fascination with the Israelites. They're not making movies about these comedic dudes. They're not making movies about none of these comedic movements. But Hollywood has a fascination with showing the Israelites in a negative light. You have to understand it is strategic, okay? Now, you have this movie called the movie Asher by Ray Ordonez that's supposed to be coming out for a long time. Asher is phases 1, 2, and phase 3. Asher is set up to prepare you, okay, for phase 3, which is to paint this movement, the Israelite movement, as a terrorist movement so the people won't have a problem when they decide to move against us. They have to convince the people that we are terrorists. How do they start convincing the people that we are terrorists? How do they lay the groundwork? They put it in a movie. Let's read what this movie Asher is about, which, by the way, Danny Glover is in, right? It says Asher is a thriller. This is from IMDb, all right? It says, when an ambitious college student infiltrates a militant religious cult, that's us, the Israelites, so they say, okay? For his thesis paper, he befriends a young devout member who he comes to suspect is plotting a terrorist operation. So this dude so-called infiltrates the Israelites only to find out that behind the scenes, the Israelites are planning to be terrorists. They put this in a movie even though it's never happened. You've had Christians that have committed terrorist attacks in America. You've had Muslims that have committed terrorist attacks in America. Never Israelites, but they're going to put it out there because that's what they want to do. So we have to be very careful. This white man is strategic, man, and he is the devil. And all these are the children and the grandchildren of COINTELPRO. I need everybody to understand that. All right? All right, family. Now, the most dangerous thing on Facebook. People say, what does this mean? What? It's a very basic slide. The most dangerous thing on Facebook is the share button. Why do I say the share button is the most dangerous button on Facebook? We're going to see why. Because Negroes need to stay away from the share button on Facebook. Because our people, we don't read. We don't research and we don't read anything. So what we do is we disseminate falsehoods that have been propagated by white supremacy. And now we have co-opted some of these falsehoods. And we're distributing these things almost virally amongst ourselves. And putting ourselves to sleep and destroying ourselves whether we realize it or not. One of the ways that we're destroying ourselves is we're sharing what's called memes. Somebody sees something on Facebook and like, wow, I want to share that with all the people on my timeline. I want them to see this information. So we hit the share button. What is the history of the memes? I went to the etymology dictionary and I looked it up. The word meme was introduced in 1976 by revolutionary biologist Richard Dawson in The Selfish Gene, coined by him from the Greek sources such as Mimi, mimes is thigh to imitate. Meme and intend to echo or to echo gene. We need a name for a new replicator that conveys the idea of a unit cultural transmission or a unit of imitation. Meme comes from the Greek, from a suitable Greek root. So in other words, what do I get from all of that? That was a mouthful, right? I want you to focus on one particular word right here. Okay, and that is, let's see, we need a name for a replicator now that conveys the idea of a unit of culture, or a unit of transmission, or unit of, meme comes from a suitable Greek word. Okay, let's see. Right, okay. I want you to focus on the word, a unit of imitation. Imitation. Very, very, very important, because that's what memes are. People tend to imitate what it is that they see. So if you see somebody teaching something that they got from a meme and they share it on your timeline and it seems to make sense, you're going to imitate what they did. You're going to take the meme and you're going to hit the share button and you're going to imitate what they did and share with all the people on your friends list. And somebody else on your friends list is going to see the meme. They're going to hit the share button and they're going to share it with their friends list. And it goes on and on and on and on. And before you know it, you got thousands of people replicating information that is false. And that's what's happening with memes. It's a very, very dangerous button, and we find ourselves having to fight against meme scholarship over and over again. Next slide. A great example of meme scholarship gone wrong. Now, you have this meme that's circulating on Facebook, right? The meme says, the same man who wrote the Holy Bible wrote a book called Demonology. Interesting. And people take this meme, they look at it, and they're like, well, damn. King James Version Bible? King James Demonology? King James was studying demons? He was into demons? Oh my God. And they hit the share button. And somebody else on their timeline sees it, and they hit the share button, on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And that's where you get meme scholarship from. Next slide. This is an example of meme scholarship gone wrong. Somebody took that meme and they put a twist on it, right? The moment a Christian finds out the same man that revised the Bible also wrote Demonology. Now, I want to say something about this particular meme, right? First of all, the other meme, the one before, said that King James wrote the Bible. That is a lie. King James did not write the Bible, nor did he translate the Bible. That is ghetto scholarship at its finest. That's not true. He didn't write the Bible, nor did he revise the Bible at all. Okay? Now, that's the first problem with this meme. The second problem with this meme is that the majority of people that share the meme never read the book Demonology. But I did. And not only did I read the book Demonology, I actually did a lecture on the book Demonology. Right? And what you're going to come to find out is that when you read the book Demonology, you'll find out that what was happening was you had a lot of witches that were living in England at the time. And there were many, many, many plots against King James's life. One of the people, or one of the groups that was plotting against his life, was a group of witches that practiced demonology. So they were putting these witches on trial, obviously, for trying to kill the king. They had a plot on his life, and they almost were successful one time. So he sat in on the trials of these witches to get an understanding of why they were so hell-bent on trying to kill him. And he wrote a book about some of the things that took place during the trial. This has nothing to do with him worshiping demons. But people share it, having never read the book, but believing a meme, and now you arguing with people that never read the book. So what I do is, I did a lecture on it. Every time I see the meme, I go to my video on YouTube, I copy it, I paste it, and I share it underneath the meme so that maybe somebody can actually watch the video and learn something. Meme scholarship is dangerous, and it is prevalent amongst us as so-called black people, as we spread the lies of white supremacy amongst ourselves and move further and further and further away from the only thing that really could save us, which is the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. Now, these groups right here, these groups are the playground for fake scholarship. These groups right here, you go in these groups and you click on the button that says photos, and you go through all the memes that are in these groups, and 90% of the memes in these groups are fake as hell, especially when it comes to the Bible, and are easily debunkable. Easily. And as you can see, there's a common thread that spreads all through these different memes. They all say, these different groups, they all say Kemet. Because those be the brothers and sisters, unfortunately, even though those are our brothers and our sisters, those be the main ones that hate the Bible so much that they put together these fake memes based on fake information that so-called white people be saying, putting out. Remember, while the so-called white man tells us the Bible is fake, he's swearing his presidents and everybody else in on that thing. His mayors, his senators, his councilmen, his governors, they're swearing on that Bible. They just want you to believe it's fake. You to believe it's not real. You to believe it's mythological, and they're going to hold on to it because they've always, ever since Esau sold his birthright, he's been trying to get it back. That's what you don't understand. Right, next slide. Another example, another perfect example of false meme scholarship. It says here, only a lie has different versions. Okay, only a lie has different versions. Now, I posted this on my Facebook page months ago when I was asking Israelites, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with this particular meme? Because this meme is false, and I'm going to show you that. You have to know how to combat this stuff. Why are there different versions of the Bible? That's a whole study in history in and of itself. And we as Israelites, if we believe in the Bible, we need to have some answers as to why there are different versions of the Bible. And there are answers for that. Okay? So now when you have the share button, which is the most dangerous button on Facebook, and you add a fake meme to that. And again, notice the name in the upper right-hand corner. So the share button plus a fake meme equals a confused Negro that winds up praying to his enemies. Okay? That's what winds up happening. A lot of people lose faith in the Bible, lose faith in its truth because they see stupid stuff being disseminated and shared all over social media, and they wind up falling victim to it for one simple reason, because they don't read and they don't study. If you read and you study, you ain't going to have no problems. That's why it is written in the scriptures, it speaks about rightly dividing the word of truth. Study to show yourself approved, a workman that need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. You can rightly divide the word of truth simply by studying. Okay? Now let's move on. Here is a prime example of another misleading meme. Watch this. This meme also I got from one of those groups. It says the oldest version of the Bible in the world is the Sinai Bible housed in the British Museum. There are over 14,800 differences between this Bible and the standard King James Bible. Just how much proof do you need, that the Bible is not the word of God, for lack of a better word? This is what this meme is saying. What this meme fails to tell you is the history of why there are, as this meme says, 14,800 differences between it and the King James Bible. The reason why there are so many differences between the Sinai version of the Bible as opposed to the King James version of the Bible is because both of those Bibles come from different manuscripts, which this meme doesn't bother to tell you. And that's very, very important, as we're going to find out why. Okay, let's move on. If you are an English-speaking only Israelite, which there are a lot of those nowadays popping up for some reason, and if you're a King James only Israelite on top of being an English only Israelite, the following slides are important information for you to know. This book right here is highly recommended by me. I think this is a must-have for every Israelite, especially if you're dealing with the King James Bible in English. If your preferred translation of the English Bible is the KJV, you should have this book or know the information in this book. I highly recommend this book. Very good. If this book was to be given 1 out of 5 stars, I would give it 4. Maybe even 4.25. Very good book. All right. This book gives you a thorough history of the translation of the most famous and most popular of all the English translations. The book also includes a lot of primary sources and very little by the way of conjecture or speculation. Man is just simply presenting the history of how that KJV got to us today. And it's a very interesting study. And I can honestly say I've been studying this for years, and I purchased this book about a year ago, and there were things in here that I didn't know. All right. But now when someone comes to me and says certain things, because of reading this book along with other books that I have as well, about three or four other books on the same subject, I'm able to better defend my standpoint as to why I use this as my preferred English translation. The other books that I have are longer reads and more exhaustive, and nowadays with people having limited time, that's why I didn't recommend those. That's why I'm recommending this. You can get through this book in a week, maybe even less. All right, if you apply yourself to it. Next slide. All right, now we're going to get into some scriptures. Now, the reason why I'm going to this particular scripture is because I want to show you something, right? Now, most people don't know who the Nicolaitans are. When you read Revelation chapter 2, verses 1 to 2, verse 6, and verses 12 through 15, this is what this slide is going into. You have a group mentioned in the Bible called the Nicolaitans. If you go and you look this word up and break it down, it's a Greek word. If you break it down, its etymology, the Nicolaitans, the word Nikeo means conquer. And the word Laos means people. So the Nicolaitans were a group that was set up to conquer the people. That's what they're set up for. They were infiltrating the different churches that were set up throughout Asia Minor, and they were bringing in heresies and doctrine, right? And some of the churches were fighting against that, and some were not. Revelation chapter 2, verse 1. Unto the angel, messenger, okay? Because that's what it's really talking about. It's talking about the leader that was over this particular church, not an actual angel up in the heavens with the Most High. Unto the angel of the church of Ephesus, write these things, saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 candlesticks. That's talking about Yahushua. Verse 2, I know thy works and thy labor and thy patience, and how thou canst not bear them which are evil. So there was a group of people that were evil that the church at Ephesus could not bear. And thou hast tried them which say they are apostles and are not, and hast found them liars. Jumping down to verse 6. But this thou hast, that thou hatest the deeds of the Nicolaitans. And I told you the word Nicolaitans means those that were set up to conquer the people, which I also hate. Verse number 12. And to the angel of the church in Pergamos, write these things, saith he, which hath the sharp sword with 2 edges. I know thy works, and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. And thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith, even in those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you where Satan dwelleth. Verse number 14. But I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam. And that's what I was talking about before. The Nicolaitans brought in heresies, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. Verse 15. So hast thou also them that hold the doctrine, that's why I have the word doctrine highlighted. So hast thou also them that holdeth the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, which things I hate. Now we're on to something. The Nicolaitans were bringing in doctrines to the churches. And they were in all the churches. They were at Ephesus and they were at Pergamos. So when we read about the Nicolaitans, so you can understand, the Nicolaitans were bringing in heresies and doctrines. that were supposed to separate or confuse the people of the Most High to bring them further away from the Most High. That is what the Nicolaitans is talking about. Now, why is that important, you might ask? Okay. Well, Nicolaitans doctrine and the original manuscripts, right? Part of the Nicolaitan doctrine that's being pushed today in our midst, right, is in these last days is the autograph doctrine, right? The autograph doctrine, that is to say, the fact that we do not have the original manuscripts. Therefore, the Bible cannot be considered to be authentic. That is a Nicolaitan doctrine. It is something that's brought amongst our people to try to make them be like, well, damn, maybe that's right. Maybe that's right. Maybe I shouldn't be dealing with the Bible because we don't have the original manuscripts. Now watch this. Let's go to the book of Luke chapter 4, verse 16. It says, and there was delivered to him the book of the prophet Isaiah. The Greek translation of the name Isaiah. Isaiah is Isaiah. And when he opened the book, he found the place where it was written. Now we have to stop and we have to think for a second. We see the word book there. That's a copy, not the original scroll that Isaiah was written on, or the original papyri or parchment, what they call autograph. They were reading from the book of Isaiah, which was a copy of the original. You have to remember, there only could be one original book of Isaiah. There only could be one original book of Genesis. There only could be one original book of Exodus, one original book of Numbers, one original book of Deuteronomy, so forth and so on. One original book of Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings. There only could be one original copy. Everything else was a copy. Let me repeat that. Let me go back and say that again. There only could be one original manuscript of Genesis, one original manuscript of Exodus, one original manuscript of Deuteronomy, one original manuscript of Leviticus, one original manuscript of Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles. There only could be one original autograph or manuscript. Everything subsequent to that is a copy. Now you had 12 tribes of Israel, right? So you had Levite priests in all the coasts of Israel. So all the Levite priests did not have the original copy of the book of Leviticus when they were teaching Israel. Only one could have the original. The other 11 tribes were reading from copies. Going as far back in Israelite history as you can go. We were dealing with copies because everybody couldn't have the original. That is common sense. You had scribal families in Israel. If I was a scribe, my father was most likely a scribe, and my son would be a scribe, and his son would be a scribe. And they would set aside and they would make copies of the original and disseminate them amongst the Levite priests that were in all the coasts and amongst Israel. So that's a Nicolaitan doctrine to say that all of a sudden now in modern times, we cannot rely on the Bible because we don't have the original manuscripts. That is a Nicolaitan doctrine. And we're clearly seeing this in the book of Luke. When Christ went into that temple, he was not reading from the original Isaiah scroll. It was a copy. That's why the word book is there. So if a copy was good enough for the Messiah, then it's good enough for me. Hope everybody understands what I'm saying. The book of Acts chapter 8, verse 27. All right. It says, let's go to the book of Acts chapter 8, verse 27. I'm going to get it in my Bible as I'm doing this. Okay. It's on your screen for you to see. Acts chapter 8. I'm reading verses 27 and 28. Okay. And it says, and he arose and went, and behold, a man of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who had charge of all her treasure, and had come to Jerusalem for to worship. Now that's key right there. This Ethiopian came to Jerusalem to worship. Go back to the book of Acts, the 2nd chapter. You could see that Israelites were still coming back and forth to Jerusalem to worship no matter where they were scattered. So this eunuch, he was an Israelite. Verse 28. And was reading and sitting in his chariot, read Isaiah the prophet. Stop. We got to stop for a second now. So the temple that Christ was in the book of Luke, the 4th chapter, they had a copy of the book of Isaiah. Now we're reading in Acts chapter 8, verse 28, where this Ethiopian eunuch who was an Israelite, he had a copy of the book of Isaiah. What is this showing you? That there were many copies of the Bible or the books of the Bible that were circulating throughout all Israel and throughout the diaspora, wherever we were. We were reading copies, not the autographs. And nobody ever had a problem with that. But now in these modern times, the Nicolaitan doctrine states because we don't have the original manuscripts, we cannot trust it. Well, here's my problem with that. When you deal with Nile Valley culture, right? When you're looking up and reading things in the Medu Neter, in the Book of the Dead, okay, and the coffin text, and the pyramid text, and all these different things, you're reading copies. You don't have the originals. Who has the original manuscripts? You have fragments of the original manuscripts that are in these museums. You have fragments, you have pieces, but you don't have all of it. You're reading copies. And a lot of times you're reading copies that come down from the Greeks. Let's keep it real. Let's not put Israel in one box and y'all don't get in the other box. What's good for one is good for the other. If we should have original manuscripts, if original manuscripts should only be trusted, then it has to also go for Egypt as well. It can't just be for the Bible. So that whole original manuscript doctrine is BS. Plain and simple. BS. All right? Now, somebody might say, Danyaahla, you lying? You lying. You're lying, right? So I just want to show you something, right? All that's left in Egypt about history is also copies. So don't let them guys come in front of the camps or in front of brothers and spit that BS to you, okay? Because all that's left of Egypt is copies. Plain and simple. So what I'm showing you on your screen is a book called The Traveler's Key to Ancient Egypt, right? And within the book, as you can see to your right, they cite Egyptologist Sir Alan Gardner in his book called Egypt of the Pharaohs, okay? And in this book, Egypt of the Pharaohs, you can read this on your own. Pretty much what Alan Gardner says is that all that's left of Egypt, as far as the history is concerned, is tats and tatters. What you're looking at in this slide right here is this is backing up what I said a minute ago. All that's left of Egypt is copies. So we say we can't deal with the Bible. A lot of people come to the Nicolaitan doctrine that you can't deal with the Bible because you don't have the originals. Then we come and we look at Egypt. We say, okay, well, maybe you're onto something. Maybe you're onto something. Now, you have this book right here called The Traveler's Key to Ancient Egypt. And within this book, you can see I got it from Google Books. I downloaded it real quick. This author cites one of the foremost Egyptologists, Sir Alan Gardner. Okay? Now, if you don't like what Alan Gardner is about to say here, then you have to take all his works and throw them out. You have to take all his works and throw them out. We're not dealing with, you're going to deal with that piece of his work over there, but you don't like this over here. Let's see what this foremost Egyptologist says about Egypt. Since a lot of brothers that deal with Kemetic science like to tell us that we can't deal with the Bible because we don't have the original manuscripts. Well, as you go down to the last two words before it goes to page 7. Now you can see the page is split, like it has half of page 6 and it starts with page 7. The last two words on page 6 going into page 7, which is a quote from Sir Alan Gardner's book, Egypt of the Pharaohs, it says, "What is proudly advertised as Egyptian history is merely a collection of rags and tatters." I'm going to read that again. What is proudly advertised as Egyptian history is merely a collection of rags and tatters. And a lot of Egyptologists, what they do is because they don't have the primaries, they fill in the blanks. They go to the Greeks and read what the Greeks wrote. They take what's left on these rags and tatters, as he calls them, these fragments of papyruses, and they mix the fragment of the papyrus with what the Greeks say and add it together and fill in the blanks and give us Egyptian history, and then turn around and tell us we can't deal with the Bible because the Bible is not an autograph. It's not the original copy. That's the audacity of these guys. That's a Nicolaitan doctrine. Plain and simple. And if you allow yourself to be fooled by that, shame on you. Okay? Next slide. The seven churches. The seven churches of the book of Revelation. And what you notice about the seven churches of the book of Revelations is they're all concentrated pretty much in the same area. Pretty much, okay? Now, I want you to take note of this particular area here called Smyrna, right? Smyrna. Very, very important area. Why is it important? Let's move on. Polycarp of Smyrna. Most of you probably have never heard of him. So let me introduce him to you. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 to 2 says, Thou, therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus, Yahushua. And the things which thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. So that was something that was taught by the Apostle Paul to Timothy, that you need to find brothers that are faithful to this thing, and you need to commit what I'm teaching you, what I learned from Christ, and what I learned from being amongst the 12 apostles in my time, and I'm committing to you, you commit to faithful men who are going to commit to faithful men, and it's going to be passed all the way down. And we have some record of that. Polycarp, AD 69 to 156 AD, Bishop of Smyrna, right? Now you read about the church of Smyrna, Revelation chapter 2, verses 8 to 10. Polycarp was the bishop of Smyrna, right? He was a student of John the Revelator. Now we're beginning to see the transmission of the information being passed down from the apostles that walk with Christ to their students who passed it down to their students. Here's a perfect example. Polycarp of Smyrna. He was one of the students of John the Revelator who wrote the book of Revelation. Now, Polycarp, being one of the early church fathers, always affixed admonitions for the expectation of scribes to be conscientious and accurate when transcribing copies of the scriptures. So as I said before, you had scribal families during the time of the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament times, you had scribes that were committed to making copies to make sure the words of the Bible, the histories of the Bible, so forth and so on, were disseminated. This is common practice. This guy who was a student of one of the men that walked with Christ, he wasn't running around looking for an autograph or an original copy. They had copies, and they made more copies of the copies. That's how history has been passed down, and it's not exclusive to the Bible. The same also goes for Egyptian history. So don't let them fool you. Okay? Next slide. Now, you can read this book on your own. I'm showing you guys the screenshot so you can see exactly where I went and what I found. Okay? This is from a book called A Translation of the Epistles of Clement of Rome, Polycarp, and Ignatius, and the Apologies of Justin the Martyr and Tertullian. Okay? And these are the writings of them that have been translated into the English for us to read. And in this translation, you can read particularly about Polycarp. Polycarp speaks about the scribes and the transcribing of the scriptures, and how the scribes need to be very careful. And above all else, he speaks about accuracy. So that was something very, 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 very important to the scribes, that they had to be accurate when they were translating, or I should say making copies of the scriptures from one person to another. And the same thing goes all the way down to when we get our Bible today. Those same admonitions were given when the Bibles were translated into English. So that's very important. Let's move on. Now, going back to this, right? The Sinai Bible and the KJV have no relation to each other. No relation. So this meme on the left is BS. I'm showing you that. Look at the right of your screen, right? You have two sets of manuscripts, which is what I mentioned earlier. You have manuscripts that come through Antioch, right? And you have manuscripts that come through Alexandria, Egypt. The King James Version Bible are from the manuscripts that come from Antioch. And that's very important. I'm going to tell you why. Because there is scriptural reference to Antioch. When you read Acts chapter 13, verse 1, we see the apostles in Antioch. That was one of the places where they were. So it makes sense that we would find the writings of the apostles in an area where the Bible clearly tells you that they were. And the King James Bible is directly from the line of the Antioch manuscripts. All the rest of the Bibles that you read about are from the Alexandrian line. The Alexandrian line, there is no record of the apostles going to Alexandria, Egypt. None whatsoever. No one can tell you where these Alexandrian manuscripts originate. They can't tell you. But they tell you that they're older and we should be dealing with them. You see what I'm saying? So the person that put this slide together has no idea about the two different sets of manuscripts. They have no idea. And if they do have an idea, they cannot tell you the origin of the Alexandrian manuscripts. Where did they come from? What apostle came to Alexandria, Egypt, and brought that information with him? Who was it? They can't tell you. All right? Play this video right here. Okay? I'm going to play it, and this will give you a brief history, which I'm going to expound on after, about the different versions of the Bible. And again, we're dealing with that meme that we saw earlier.
Bible after 100 AD. The Old Testament was already assembled and accepted as one book. However, the New Testament letters and Gospels were only recently written. Christian churches painstakingly copied and disseminated them. These scrolls were all gathered together in one important city, Antioch of Syria. Antioch was 310 miles north of Jerusalem. From there came the first gospel missionary movement. The Bible tells us the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. These Christian believers collected the Holy Scriptures and made many copies. Soon they were collected into a single Bible. This is known as the Northern Stream and later as the Textus Receptus. However, there was another stream. 317 miles southwest of Jerusalem lies the city of Alexandria, Egypt. And it was in that city the so-called intellectuals perverted the Word of God because of their pagan philosophical education, changing the manuscripts. They argued about what to include, what to change. Satan used these so-called intellectuals in Egypt to confound and mutilate the Old and New Testaments of God, and the mess they produced is called the Alexandrian manuscripts. They argued like mad in Egypt for years.
Westcott and Hort would combine them into what is now known as the critical Greek text that would be used for biblical translation throughout the 20th century. According to the Vatican website, Cardinal Martini completed his studies in theology at the Faculty of Theology in Chieri, Italy, where he was first ordained a priest in 1952. In 1967, with the help of a man named Eugene Nida, the United Bible Society entered into a UBS Vatican agreement to undertake hundreds of interconfessional Bible translation projects worldwide using functional equivalence principles. The term functional equivalence is another way of saying paraphrase. Many believers have expressed a concern over the progressive use of paraphrase in the newer Bibles, with each edition becoming farther and farther removed from the original languages. Since the Scripture says that faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God, how do such changes impact the faith that was once delivered to the saints?
All right, so that was a lot. So what we saw right there pretty much was what I said before, that you had two streams of scriptures. You had the scriptures that come from Antioch, where, as we saw, Acts 11, verse 26, also Acts chapter 13, verse 1, there is biblical precedent that the apostles were in Antioch. That's where they set up shop at. Also, when you see that word Christian, just so you know, those were the Israelites that followed Christ. That's all it was. These were Israelites that followed Christ, and they were being called Christians because of the fact that they followed Christ. But they were in Antioch. When you get to Alexandria, you don't find the apostles in Alexandria. So we have to find out what is the origin of those manuscripts. Another important thing that was said in that video that you can do your own research on, there's plenty of information and books on these things, is that the newer Bibles, or the ones that come through the Alexandrian line, deal with what's called paraphrasing. They paraphrase things rather than a word-for-word translation of the scriptures. Now, what I have on your screen is something called the Bible Translation Continuum. And what it does is it shows you the Bibles and where they fall as far as their translations are concerned. To the left, you have Bibles that fall closer to a word-for-word translation. Then you have the Bibles in the middle that's like a thought-for-thought translation. And then you have the Bibles in the middle that are paraphrases. So the further right you go, the further right you go on your screen is the further away from the actual original manuscripts and text that you move. Because the other translations get into paraphrasing. And they're coming also directly from a line of scriptures, which is the Alexandrian manuscripts, that there's no records of the apostles being in Alexandria, Egypt. Furthermore, the Alexandrian manuscripts are under what you just saw, which I'm going to get into in a couple of slides. You just saw something about a UBS Vatican agreement. So the Vatican, as well as the United Bible Society, they got together and they made the Alexandrian manuscripts the official manuscripts from which they have translated all these new Bibles. Again, manuscripts that there's no records of biblically that the apostles ever went there. That is extremely important. All these are Nicolaitan doctrines. So that meme that you saw about the Sinai Bible is not authentic at all. So it would make sense that there are 14,800 differences in the KJV, because the Sinai Bible is more of a thought-for-thought or paraphrase Bible rather than a word-for-word translation. You have to know this history. You can't just see a meme and post it and think you're doing something, because you're doing nothing but confusing people when you don't know history. All right? Pursuant to the book of Acts chapter 13, verse 1, we find the apostles' line in Antioch, Syria, from which the Textus Receptus comes from, the KJV, derives. We do not find the Alexandrian manuscripts, okay? So you could clearly see the New Testament churches, and you could clearly see that Antioch, Syria, right there, okay? Antioch is in Syria, all right? Let's move on. If you look at the journeys of the Apostle Paul, now, if you have to start off by looking at the bottom of my screen, you have Paul's first journey, which is white, second journey yellow, third journey blue, journey to Rome red. Now, if you look at the screen, you'll clearly see that Paul went all from Jerusalem north all the way up until he even went as far north as Rome itself, as we know, pursuant to the scriptures. But the Apostle Paul never went south to Alexandria. Look at south. Paul never went to Alexandria at all. So the apostles, the 12, they never went there. And the Apostle Paul, he never went there. So where do these manuscripts come from? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. This is why you see so many different versions of the Bible, because you have versions of the Bible based upon manuscripts that cannot be authenticated. I'm going to say it again. You have versions of the Bible that are based upon manuscripts that cannot be authenticated biblically. Okay, next slide. The Peshitta Bible. You might have heard of this before, right? Remember, Antioch is in Syria. The Peshitta Bible from the Antioch line. From Syrian people, Antioch line, dwelling northeast of Palestine, there were at least four major versions. You have the Peshitta of 145, the Old Syriac of 400, the Palestinian Syriac of 450, and the Philotian AD 508, revised by Thomas Harklian in AD 616, and known as the Harklian Syriac. Peshitta means straight or rule. It set the early standard because of its composition and strong agreement with the Greek text underlying the King James Bible. So the Peshitta Bible from Syria, where Antioch was, the underlying text of that Bible strongly agrees with the KJV, not the Syrian Bible. Very interesting. Because of this, modern-day scholars, Nicolaitans, they assign it a later date of 415 AD. Okay, let's move on. These two papyri, Alexandrian line, have 73 verses in common and are found to disagree 73 times. That's very important. You have the Chester Beatty Papyrus and the Bodmer Papyrus, which are from the Alexandrian line of Egypt, which I keep reiterating to everyone, is a line that we cannot authenticate biblically. All right? And on the Chester Beatty Papyrus and the Bodmer Papyruses, there are 73 verses. You can clearly see somewhat fragmented, especially on the left. They don't agree with each other. They don't agree with each other. 73 verses, and there's 73 differences in the 73 verses. Now, these papyruses, actually, the transliteration of them are available online. Okay, it would be a very exhaustive study if you decide to get into that. But these things are available online, and if you get into a deep study of it, you're going to find that they disagree with each other a lot. Why? Because it's not inspired of the Most High. When you get into what is known as the Textus Receptus or the Alexandrian line manuscripts, they agree with each other over 90% of the time, which shows this authenticity, because the people that were copying these, they didn't know each other. These guys did not know each other. They were in different cities within that region, and they were getting copies of the manuscripts, and they were copying them. And the people that were doing the copies didn't know each other, but yet the manuscripts agreed with each other when they were found. That's very, very important. All these things are for another day, man. A lot of these things will be in my book. I know maybe some of what I'm saying may be confusing to people. I'll explain it a little better in my book, but for right now, I just wanted to present this to everyone. Okay, let's move on. So this is pretty much an index of the Alexandrian manuscripts, the dates and what they contain. Now, remember I said that these things are fragmented, right? So depending on what Alexandrian manuscripts you find, you'll find that they all contain pieces of the Gospels and epistles, but none of them are complete, which is why in the newer versions of the Bible, as we know, you find many different verses missing out of some of the newer translations of the Bible. The reason why there are verses that are in the KJV, and you can Google this yourself. I didn't have to put this in my presentation. Google verses that are in the KJV that are not in the other translations. And you're going to see that the reason why there are certain verses missing from some of the newer Bibles, the newer versions, for lack of a better word, is because these are only contained fragments. Some of these manuscripts only contained fragments, and they were missing pieces. So they had to leave those things out. Okay? Very important to understand that. All right? All right, let's move on. So again, the Sinai Bible and the KJV have no relation to each other, as I showed you. You have the line on the left, which is the Antioch line, from which you get the King James Version Bible. That's the line from which the apostles come, their writings come from. And you have the Alexandrian line. So there's no relation whatsoever. All right. So that meme was garbage. And that's why I said earlier in the presentation, meme scholarship is predicated upon that share button and things going viral for no reason. So that share button is very, very, very dangerous. All right. By the way, just so you know, when you do the research, the Sinai Bible was actually found in the trash can in a monastery. That's a fact. Look it up. The Sinai Bible, which is now housed in the British Museum as though it's something of great value, was actually found in a trash can in a monastery. Why? Because it's trash. That's why. So, again, this is another example of meme false scholarship. Just because you see a meme and you hear something about different versions, maybe some of the versions of the Bible that are out there are not actually versions at all, because they cannot be authenticated as to who came up with them, as opposed to other manuscripts. If you did your studies, you would know that. But if you see a meme and you just share it, that's why you have so many people that are fooled by that. It's very important to study these things. All right. I went over this in my presentation of the conspiracy to destroy the Bible. I will go into this more in my book, but I just thought I would bring it back just so people understand certain things. There was a group created called the Bible Destruction Group in 1776. It was created. Now, if the Bible was so fake, like what they're trying to push nowadays, so I need somebody to explain to me why there was even a group called the Bible Destruction Group. Why did academic white men get together and decide that they were going to do everything in their power to destroy the Bible? They didn't do that for any other manuscripts. No other manuscripts. Not the Quran, okay? Not any of the Egyptian corpus of Egyptian texts. None of that. But that Bible, they got together and decided they were going to destroy it. And I need an explanation as to why would they get together and destroy something that's fake. It's because it's not fake. That's why. but we'll talk about that later. The founder of the Bible Destruction Group was a guy by the name of Carl Anton. He's a graduate from Ibe Schultz University, Yeshiva. He occupied the chair as a professor of Hebrew at Helmstedt. After graduating from Yeshiva, he converted to Christianity. Anton's mission was so sensitive that he is not mentioned as being a Jew in the Jewish Encyclopedia. They didn't want you to know he was a so-called Jew. Carl Anton's mission was as follows. You develop a closed circle of intellectuals, mainly academics, who would occupy chairs at leading universities. One of the most famous ones of today is Israel Finkelstein. Okay. When they put those people in those chairs at leading universities, right? Point number two, it put itself in position, obviously, to control information, vital to Bible studies. So we see guys like Israel Finkelstein getting funding to do all this research, while others with equal credentials are not given funding to do research when it comes to the Bible. I wonder why. And don't say I can't prove it, because I can prove that there are people with equal academic scholarship that won't get money. If y'all don't think that that's strategic, I don't know what to tell you. So they put themselves in position to control information by funding the people that they want to fund, that they know are not going to come back and validate the Bible. Rather, they will write books like the Bible Unearthed and try to tell you that David didn't exist. It's very strategic, but if your eyes are open, you see right through it. Okay? I.e., scholastic publications, libraries, and archives. They put themselves in positions to control these sciences and these disciplines and these areas of study. They put themselves in position and put out what they want to put out, and then tell us that the evidence doesn't exist. And you give that same amount of funding to somebody else, and they're going to show you that these people did exist, but they won't do that. Okay? Next one is enhance and promote career advancement of the Biblical Destruction Group members. So, in other words, you have other people that come in underneath these chairs and these heads of departments, and what they do is they rise these guys up in the rank. Obviously, because if I'm a member of the Bible Destruction Group and I'm a chair of a university, I'm going to be a chair of a university, but only for so long. So at some point, somebody's going to come and occupy the chair when I decide to retire. Okay, which goes into the next point about itself being self-perpetual. So what you do is when someone else comes in that's a part of that Biblical Destruction Group, they promote and advance really fast through the ranks. All right? And then the group is self-perpetuating so that at least once in their lifetime, as far as sitting as a chair of a department or head of a department, at least once in their lifetime, they make sure that they appoint somebody in the department that they know is going to take over and groom them and take over so that they can continue this practice of having people in the positions that suppress information concerning the Bible to make it seem like the Bible is not real. This is not a figment of my imagination. The Bible Destruction Group is real, and funding from members of the Bible Destruction Group and those that will say the Bible is not real is specifically earmarked for people like this, such as Israel Finkelstein, and it was reported in an accredited newspaper in Israel. The information is out there if you're looking. I will present it at another time. My brother Divine Prospect already presented that. So this is not nothing new, but I'll present it again another time if you didn't see it. Okay? So the UBS, the United Bible Society, which spawned the American Bible Society, the ABS, they are all in cahoots with the Vatican to produce these fake versions of the Bible that are directly related to the Alexandrian manuscripts to throw our people off. The white man is the devil and a liar, straight up and down. The agreement between the UBS, the United Bible Society, and the Vatican spawned what is called the translation explosion. That's what it's called. When the UBS and the Vatican came to that agreement, we now have something called the translation explosion. It wasn't always where you had so many versions of the Bible. It wasn't always so. Going back 100 years, it wasn't always so. Okay? Maybe even going back 60 years, it wasn't always so. If you go back to 1950, it wasn't always so. You had a couple of different translations, yes, but not what you see today. You go to a bookstore today, and you see about 50, 60 different translations of the Bible. That's on purpose. That's called the translation explosion, and it's on purpose. But what's funny is that the majority of these translations, the underlying text is the Alexandrian manuscripts. That's for a reason, okay? Here it is on the Vatican's website. They are heralding the fact that they have an agreement with the UBS for interconfessional cooperation in translating the Bible. Interconfessional cooperation in translating the Bible. The nickname for that is the Translation Explosion, okay? Just so you know. So the Vatican is admitting that this is exactly what they did, okay? And I thought Christianity was supposed to be moving away from Roman Catholicism. Whether you realize it or not, they're actually in league with each other. Those in the know that. Here's more on it. The text shared by these two editions was adopted internationally by Bible societies. In the following agreement between the Vatican and the United Bible Societies, it served as a basis for new translations and for revisions made under their supervision. Who supervised the revisions and the new translations? It was the Vatican. It was the Vatican. That's who it was. These other versions of the Bible are nothing but Vatican versions of the Bible. That's all. Ever since you got the KJV, which remember, they tried to kill him. Remember, Guy Fawkes and all these guys were working under orders from the Vatican Church. If you don't know who the Guy Fawkes is responsible for what's known as the gunpowder plot when they decided that they were going to blow up Parliament and King James. The Vatican was plotting to kill him. Again, why are you plotting to kill people that are translating a book that's fake? I don't understand it. Why would there be councils that were had over the years that forbade lay people from reading the Bible? If they read the Bible, they were put to death. They would put out papal bulls on this thing. Why was that done if the Bible was fake? It doesn't make any sense. And if, by the way, if only a lie has different versions, does that apply to the 42 laws of Ma'at? Because it depends. Sometimes they call it the 42 ideals of Ma'at. Sometimes it's called the 42 negative confessions. Sometimes it's called the 42 divine principles. And depending on where you read it and who you read it from, it's always worded differently. But that's okay. That's okay. Nobody has a problem with that. But when it comes to the Bible, we can't trust it. This is just a lot of hypocrisy, man, in the conscious community, and that's the problem. And it's really all going back to white supremacy because the white man is the puppet master behind all these goddamn lies. All right? So do you or someone you know have a meme addiction? If they have a meme addiction, I suggest that they call 1-800-MEME-REHAB because they get to get off them damn memes and stop hitting that damn share button and present real information. With that, I'm going to take you back now to the ending part of my lecture at Nicholas, Brooklyn. For those of you that saw it on Maccabees TV, you probably already saw this. For those that's watching this for the first time, I'm going to take you back to the store because at this point I had ended my lecture and I'm going to add on the addendum of what I was saying to the crowd when we were done. All right?
Does anybody, we're going to deal strictly with the King James Bible. Anybody can tell me. The King James Bible has been revised how many times? Who knows? And if you answer, I have a part B, so you have to be able to answer part B too. No, funny, I will stop you in my camp. We gone over this. King, you can sit now, yeah. You said you had your hand up. How many times?
What I heard, 7 or 8 times.
7 or 8 times. So if it's been revised 7 or 8 times, that means we at camp now. If it's been revised 7 or 8 times, it means it's tampered with.
I mean, I gotta
Anybody else? The King James Bible has been revised 7 or 8 times, he says. That means it's been tampered with. How do you deal with that? If we're at camp, how do y'all deal with that? And a lot of y'all in here teach on the street. Somebody say something, how do you deal with that? Right. If somebody walks up to the camp and says the King James Bible has been revised 7 to 8 times, which I agree with, how do you answer that? Man, it's going to be in Egypt next week. I'm going to see all of you dudes with unks on and all that stuff, man. Come on, Israel. No Zahabi, you in my camp. No.
Where's scholars at?
Come on, y'all. Shar, hit me with it.
Shugga y'all.
No doubt. I don't want to say all that. Shugga y'all, hit me with it.
Copyright. We're going to deal with the Hebrew dictionary. the Hebrew and the English, and the etymology of words. That's what we deal with to show forth that the King James Version is accurate or close to the Hebrew in translation.
I agree, but it's been revised 8 times. Just the King James, ain't doing enough. Just the King James. Since it's come out, they revised it 8 times. So how could it not be tampered with? How could it be the word of God if they revised it 8 times?
But it's the new.
You know what? I'm gonna say this. That's actually a good thing because the majority of people that come to the campus say that. You know how it is. You see it. When they come to the camp and they say that to us, we like prove it. They can't, but they are right. Okay, I'm gonna give it to you. I gotta sit my ass down. The King James Bible has been revised 8 times, and this will be in my book. And it does not mean that it's not the Word of God. You see, before in ancient times, right, the word color was spelled C-O-L-O-U-R. Nowadays it's spelled C-O-L-O-R, right? In ancient times there was no J's in the Hebrew in the 1611, but then the letter J was introduced in the 1700s. So all those are revisions. It didn't change the Word of God, but as the English language evolved, as spelling evolved, as spelling became standardized, they had to keep revising the Bible to keep up with the changes in the English language, but the underlying text is the same. The original King James Bible was printed in something called Gothic print. If you see Gothic print, when you go home, open up Word and look at Gothic print, it's almost unreadable. If you have the original 1611, you can see that. So as the English language changed, they changed the text, the font of the text, to make it more readable. That's another revision. None of that changes the underlying text of the word. All it did was it evolved as the English language evolved. That's what they don't understand. So they, I'm sorry?
Just a play on English.
It's just a play on English. That's all it is. It's what they call newspeak. As the language evolves, they keep having to update it. Now also, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going off the top of the head, I believe they said there's about 450,000 words in the King James Bible. Okay? It was one man, originally, right, that sat there and, remember you have to take each letter.
Something to prove it.
Right, huh?
Something to prove it.
Right. There was one dude that sat there, right, because they used to have to take the letters. When the Gutenberg press was invented, they had to take each letter for almost 500,000 words. They had to do each letter and put it so that they could print it. Now, one man with almost 500,000 words, he ain't gonna make some mistakes. He gonna be half asleep while he's doing it and make some spelling errors. So the first edition of the King James, when it came out and they proofread it, the dude spelled some words wrong, so they sent his behind back to make those corrections. That's another revision. Does any of that change the underlying text of the word? I'm asking y'all.
Not at all.
Y'all need to notice when they come to the camp and send their behinds down the block with that shit. I'm gonna tell y'all straight, because that's what we do, right, Lions of Israel? That's what we do when they come to the camp with that garbage, all right? With that, I'm gonna step down and I'm going to introduce